Welcome to Uncle's channel. Thanks for watching today. And today we're going to rank all the Disney Capcom games on the retro systems. Now, they had pretty much an exclusive deal with Nintendo at this point. So we're talking about the Game Boy, the NES, the SNES, N64, and the Game Boy Color. And that's really where all the Disney Capcom games are going to come from. And after that, it's like Disney Interactive started taking over. And so Capcom is sort of out of the picture. So there are 20 games that we're going to go through. And so let's just start it off here. Now, our first game we have here is Chip 'n Dale Rescue Rangers on the NES. And I'm here to tell you, I loved this game as a kid. Me and my dad used to play this game all the time. I have so many memories of it, and like the first level is still like the most iconic to me, probably because we died so much in the game and we just had to replay it over and over. But the core enemies here, you get the little robot dogs, you get to hide yourself under the box, your little eyes sticking out. I mean, it's just a great game. I love that you get Zippy as like your little star power. There are so many iconic moments in this game. The bosses are great. I have a ton of fun with it. I have a ton of memories with it. Me and my dad, if I could go back and play it again right now, I mean, my dad probably be down at this moment. And so for me, Chip 'n Dale Rescue Rangers is a S tier game. All the way, I love the game, start to finish. Chip 'n Dale Part 2, I got that years later as I'd grown older, probably in like middle school, and I really wasn't as into Chip 'n Dale anymore. And I played with my dad some at that point, but we didn't really like get into the game as much, and it doesn't seem to be as much fun of a game as far as like the charm isn't there. Like some of the enemies from the show, they don't make their appearance till like later in the game. There's more dialogue in the game. I mean, it's just not as good of a game, but if you want like the core mechanics, it's still the same game. And so it's definitely not S tier for me because it doesn't have the same appeal to it or same memories to it. But I'd say it's definitely still an A tier game because the mechanics are still solid. It's still the same, just not going to have as many memories to go along with it. Next up, we have Darkwing Duck, and some reason Game Boy is first, but we're going to do the NES version first before the Game Boy. Because Darkwing Duck on the NES, I still remember when I got it. I was in second grade, I got it for my birthday, and I adored this game. I love the show anyway. I always thought Darkwing Duck was like such a forgotten hero of the 90s. And to me, the game is just a perfect game. It's like basically Mega Man. It was built on like the Mega Man 5 engine, and so it really is a Mega Man game when you want to get down to it. With a few different mechanics, like you can finally hang on the little ledges here, or hang on little platforms here. You'll see it in the video. You can hang on these little things here. That's a different mechanic. You know, pull different levers. You get different weapons. The bosses are all in from the show. All the enemies are from the show. Just a great game, start to finish. I mean, it's a challenging game too. It's not an easy game to go through. To me, Darkwing Duck, because of the memories, challenge, and just basically being a Mega Man game, it's an S tier game. And around the same time, the Game Boy Darkwing Duck came out, and it was basically the exact same as the NES, just a little bit worse graphics. The levels were toned down a little bit. Still a really good game, just not a S tier, so it's gonna be an A tier game. Still a really good game. Next up, we have Adventures in the Magic Kingdom, and this is a really fun game. It's not a game you have to like think about. People don't really remember this game unless they just happen to rent it or buy it growing up. It's not one that has stood the test of times or got remastered or anything like that. It's just simply a game where you play in a Disney theme park and you just simply go through a multitude of like different mini games to try to collect all these keys to finally unlock the final level or the final gate here. And the mini games are actually, they're all pretty solid. You have like racing, which is really done really well compared to a lot of the other racing games on the NES. You have Space Mountain, where you actually get to like guide a spaceship, which is really fun. The pirate level was hard, not really my favorite, and the train level really wasn't my favorite, but the Haunted Mansion, holy cow, this was a fantastic level. It's really what I always envisioned like a Ghostbusters game should have been for the NES. You have ghosts in it, you have a little candle for your little, your weapon here, you have little hands coming out of the caskets. I mean, it's such a great level. Even like when lightning strikes, you have like this little pod in the back that's actually like a skull. I mean, there's just little stuff like that, even the mirrors. It's just a great haunting level. I wish the whole game had just simply been the Haunted Mansion. It'd probably been an S tier game if it could have been that. But since it has these other games in it, and some of them are pretty good, some of them are a little below average, or, the train one's a little below average. I'm going to say overall, if you just mixed them all together, you're probably going to come out with an A tier game. Because the Haunted Mansion's S tier, some of the other ones are A tier, probably a couple B tiers in there. So, I mean, overall, I'd say it's an A tier game. Next, we have The Little Mermaid on the NES, and this to me growing up was an okay game. We rented it first, and then we ended up buying the game later on. And I don't have a lot of memories playing with like my brother or my dad growing up, and it was just sort of a okay one-player game. I'm going to say it's probably just a straight B tier. I didn't love it. I didn't hate it. It was just sort of an average game. Next, we have The Little Mermaid on the Game Boy, and I would actually say it's almost identical to the NES one, just toned down a little bit, but the tone down doesn't seem to affect the gameplay a whole lot, doesn't seem to affect the fun value a whole lot. I'm going to say it's still a B tier game. Let's throw a few SNES games into the mix here. There were 2 SNES games that Capcom did with Disney. The first one is going to be Goof Troop, and it's going to be like a overhead Zelda type game, but you can do it co-op, which is sort of unique for the time. And you use one screen at a time, just like the old original Zelda was. It actually reminds me more of like Star Tropics, because a lot of it takes place in like on the beach and such as that, especially the opening part. And so it reminds me a little bit of Star Tropics as well. Pick up different items, you have different ways to attack enemies, or pick up different rocks and plants and such. Throw at them, different items you can find throughout the environment. Overall, it's actually a pretty fun game, especially if you can find somebody to do like co-op with you. I'd say it's probably a or B. If they ever like decide to put on like Nintendo Switch Online, you could actually like find people to play online with. I'd say it's probably an A tier game. So we're gonna go with A tier for Goof Troop. Next up, we have what people would probably say is like one of their favorite games of all time, which is going to be Aladdin on SNES. Now, this is different than the Genesis Aladdin and even the NES Aladdin. And if there was a Game Boy one, it's different than that one as well, because this is the only one that Capcom made. And it's a great game. It's like platforming at its finest. You get to throw little apples, journey through these platforming levels. You also have like the levels where you're like chasing the lava, or lava's coming after you. It's a really fun game. I like it a lot. My wife, she grew up with it, and she would definitely put it as an S tier game. I didn't actually play it until we got married, and when I played it, I was like, man, this is a really good platformer. But since I don't have all the memories associated with it, I'm probably going to stick it as an A tier game, even though my wife would 100% say I'm wrong and it is an S tier game. But we're going to go with A tier. Next up, we have a game called Mickey Mousecapade, and we rented this game a lot as a kid from a store called Mega Video. And I don't know why we rented it all the time. I guess because the cover was so cool. Like, I really liked the cover, the little safari outfits, the little alligator down there off the side of the boat. But I don't like this game. Like, I always found it weird as a kid. It's hard. It's not a lot of fun. It's not a very pretty game either. To me, just because I never liked it, I'm going to put it as a D tier. And I find it odd to some degree because, like I said, we rented it a lot. And then we ended up even buying the game at some point at like a discount store. And I just don't like the game. So I'm going to put it as a D tier. And speaking of another Mickey Mouse game that looks very similar, we have Mickey's Dangerous Chase. It is the most basic platformer you could possibly find on the Game Boy. It's not a lot of fun, and it's very, very basic. Somebody, if they had nostalgia for it, maybe a C. I don't have a lot of nostalgia for it. I don't think it's a very good game, so I'm going to put it as a D tier. And now let's rinse those D tier games out of our mouth, and let's find a great game to replace it with, and that's going to be DuckTales on the NES. This is the pinnacle of gaming goodness. This is like probably the first really, really great game I ever played as a kid, because the action is perfect, the controls are perfect, the music is perfect, the graphics are perfect. I mean, you truly get to feel like you were old man Scrooge McDuck as you were going through these levels with your little cane. You use a bounty mechanic. There's so many like little memorable moments in it too, like the enemies, like the little slugs in the mines here, or like when you're in the Himalayas and you can actually get stuck in the snow and you're like all excited. But I mean, like, there's so many great things about this game. Me and my brother played this game to just no end as kids, and it's still one of my all-time favorite games. Some of my favorite memories playing this game. And the music, like I said earlier, the music is probably where I first heard great gaming music. The Moon soundtrack, I know everybody talks about it, and it's probably overblown to some people, but it really is that iconic of a song. It is one of the best video game songs of all time. So DuckTales is going to be an S tier game 100%. And then DuckTales on the Game Boy came out, and the cover for it is also a really great cover. I mean, the cover on the regular NES one's a great cover as well. But I really like the colors of the cover for the Game Boy one. But it sort of stops there. The game is very similar to the Game Boy as far as like gameplay wise, but it's very, very toned down. It's the same levels, but it's not exactly the same. As far as like some of the parts are missing, the music is like all messed up. I mean, just listen to some of the music right here. Like, that's not a bad song, but when you know what the Moon song should sound like, and you get this instead, it's a pretty big letdown. The action was not as easy to control in the game. I'm not sure exactly why, but it just doesn't control as well. The levels are not as fun as they were in NES. The music is off a little bit. It's not a a horrible game. I think if you had never played like the NES version, you'd probably like this version a lot better. And so to me, I'm just going to put it as a B tier game because I think if you hadn't played the NES, this would be a pretty fun game, but it's definitely not a great game. And then we had DuckTales 2 on the NES, and sort of like Chip and Dale 2, I didn't get this till I was a little bit older, and so I don't have as many memories of playing with my brother growing up. And the levels, they're just not as fun as the original DuckTales, and it could be because of the nostalgia, it could just be simply because I played it so much, the first one anyway. But the levels don't really stick with me as much. You do have a few new moves that you can do. Some of it seems sort of borrowed from Darkwing Duck a little bit. But, I mean, it's a good game. There's no denying it's a good game. It has the core mechanics of DuckTales. It's just not as fun as the first one, but it's still a very good game. And if you are hankering for more DuckTales, I definitely recommend going for it. I'd say it's an A tier game. And as far as like the Game Boy one goes, it's very similar, and it actually controls better than the first DuckTales game. I'd actually say this was better than the first DuckTales game, but it's not A tier on the level with the core NES one because it's just not quite as good. But it's better than the other Game Boy one. You know what? I hate this, but we're actually going to move the original Game Boy one down to C tier. Boy, I hate to do that, but it just doesn't control as well, and I think knowing what the NES one had, that's what hinders that first Game Boy one so much. I hate to do it, but I do think it's probably more accurately a C tier game. And now let's talk about the newest game on the list, which is going to be Magical Tetris Challenge. And this is basically Disney's version of Tetris. And if you like Tetris, you'll probably like this game. It's a good game. There's a few different little things about it on there. You can get like extra large pieces, some are a little bit, weird looking, as like just don't fit well, but it makes the game a little bit unique, a little bit more fun. A lot of different modes in the game. It's a fun game. I never like had it growing up, but I did play it some, and so I'm gonna say it's a B tier game. The Game Boy game, it's very similar to it. If you like Tetris, you'll probably enjoy this one, and so I'm gonna put it as a B tier game as well. And that moves us into TailSpin. Now let's do TailSpin on NES before we do the one on the Game Boy here. And TailSpin on NES, I still remember playing this as a kid. We rented it, but we never bought it. And it's not like Mickey Mousecapade where we just like didn't like it and somehow ended up owning it eventually. Disney's TailSpin, we rented it a couple times, and I found it really hard. Our family could never get past just like the first few levels, and it's sort of a awkward controller. I don't really know how to describe it because like you can do diagonal shooting in it, but the diagonal shooting just doesn't ever like seem to hit the enemies very accurately. And the sort of the gimmick here is you can like turn your plane around and go backwards and go through the level backwards if you want to collect some items. I mean, it's a neat idea, but I just don't enjoy it a whole lot. And so to me, I'm going to put it as a C tier game. And the Game Boy one is very similar mechanics. I don't feel like it adds or takes anything away from it being in black and white on the Game Boy. So we're going to put it as a C tier game as well. And then that leads us to our final one here, Who Framed Roger Rabbit on the Game Boy. And if you like this game, you must love to read because this game is just like non-stop reading. Like the first like half the game is just reading, trying to figure out where to go. Not really like solving puzzles, just simply talk to somebody and they tell you to go talk to somebody else and they tell you to go talk to somebody else and you just sort of run around the town. It's a dry game. You eventually do get to some action, but even the action is, I don't know, sort of lackluster. I just don't like the game. I'm going to put it as a D tier game. It's just not a lot of fun to me. But overall, this is my ranking of the Disney Capcom games. What do you guys think? Do you agree with the ranking? Do you think some games should be higher? Do you think some games should be lower? Let me know in the comments down below. But if you enjoyed the video, be sure to like and subscribe to the channel. As always, go out there, find a great game to play. Just have a great rest of the day.